I'm Amber Bellageau, and I'm here to talk to you about this thing called innovation. We hear a lot about it these days in car commercials, or in Apple product ads, or even shoe companies claim their new innovative sneaker. We hear it everywhere. The question is, what is it? Where does this word come from? Is it a calculating thing, or is it a creative thing? How does it work? The answer is yes. It takes both calculation, or planning, and creativity to be an innovator. And without both, you're probably going to fail as one. The best way to describe innovation is to use examples, and I'm going to use 3 different people. Artists, because being an art major, I'm most familiar with these people. And if you have had any art history classes in college or even high school, you'll probably be familiar with them as well. I'm going to use Michelangelo, Monet, and Jackson Pollock. Each of these artists are innovators in their own way, and even though all 3 of them are completely different, they all change their societies around them. Well, this subject, it took me quite a while trying to research another topic, way too broad a topic, in the KSU Sturgis Library before I came across this topic. And so I decided I'd research it further and ended up doing my project on what makes those artists innovators. Alright, so let's just start off here with the most well-known of the 3 artists, Michelangelo. To get some background nailed down, let's just list a few traits that he had. Let's see. He's a child prodigy. He was good at what he did, and so good that by the age of 13, he was better than his teacher, Ghirlandaio, who was the best in Florence at the time. Of course, his classmates weren't too happy about that, and it didn't really help that he was very arrogant about it. But he had pure talent going for him. He was, after all, only 24 when he sculpted one of his masterpieces, and one of the best sculptors in the world, I might add, the Pieta. Of course, to be an innovator, talent isn't always enough. You have to have a good patron. In other words, someone who has money to fund you. With Michelangelo, by a stroke of luck or divine intervention or fate or whatever, he had one. His patron's name was Lorenzo de' Medici, but everyone called him Lorenzo the Magnificent. While Michelangelo was in Ghirlandaio's workshop, he was out looking for young artists and poets and scientists to join his entourage of sorts of intellectuals. The Medici family were basically the equivalent to the mafia at the time, and just as the Godfather took in Sinatra, Lorenzo took in Michelangelo. So Lorenzo brought him in, and he learned to sculpt from Donatello, a great master of sculpting, and from the fragments of ancient Greek and Roman times sculptures. But most of all, Michelangelo was a dreamer. His father was a magistrate, kind of at the level of a banker these days, and he didn't really like the idea of his son becoming a craftsman. He wanted him to be either a banker or a merchant or someone important, someone much more prestigious than an artist. And when he found him drawing, he actually used to beat him. Of course, you can imagine how this went over with any 13-year-old boy. It'd be like telling your teenage boy he has to be a lawyer and not a musician. Needless to say, he kept doing art. Eventually, his father was forced to accept his dream, and Michelangelo was set on his course in history. He became one of the most famous, innovative minds of the Renaissance. So that's Michelangelo. But what about Monet? Was he an innovator too? Monet had another important part of being an innovator. He was a rebel. Now, hold on. I know what you're thinking. And no, I don't mean the James Dean-esque rebel without a cause. In fact, he had a very specific cause. Robert Gordon, an art historian who has done some extensive research on Monet, said in his book that Monet's eye was his first line of attack against the enemy, against everything that was stale, worn out, or conventional or artificial. Like pretty much any other movement, Impressionism is a reaction against the last art style. Someone starts a movement, someone else rebels against it. It's kind of just how art history works. It's just one long string of reactions. Monet and his fellow Impressionist innovators rebelled against the French schools, who were all rules and regulations. See, the French schools initially rejected Monet, not just once, but quite a few times. One critic even said, "It's precisely because he's making progress that I voted against him." Monet, naturally, did not like this, so he worked against him. So, you may be saying, okay, Michelangelo was a persistent dreamer, and Monet was a rebel. I can buy that, they're innovators. But Amber, didn't you mention some other guy? Jackson Pollock. Sure, you've probably heard the name before. Well, maybe not, but that's okay. But the important thing is, who is he? Was he an innovator? Well, if I show you a picture of his art, you'll probably recognize him, but innovator will probably not come to your mind. More likely, you're thinking, wow, I could do that. Well, that's probably true, and many of my non-art friends say that about modern art, like Pollock's. I always say one thing to them: you didn't do it first. That's why Pollock is an innovator. He did it first. He was an inventor. He changed art so that it wasn't about knowing how to do art, it was about feeling art. He changed art so that it wasn't about the end product, it was about the actual doing of art. Harold Rosenberg, another art historian, said, at a certain moment, the canvas began to appear to one American painter after another as an arena in which to act, rather than a space in which to reproduce. So, the artist became as important as the actual art. Pollock was vital to the transforming of art in America. Now I mentioned these three artists: Michelangelo the Dreamer, Monet the Rebel, and Pollock the Inventor. But these three aspects are not only interchangeable between these three artists, but any innovator, whether it be Steve Jobs, Thomas Edison, or even John Lennon. Most any innovator you meet will have these three traits. Some, in fact, have more than of one particular trait than others, but if there is an innovator involved, no matter who or where or what or when, chances are things are about to change. Whether it be in art, government, sports, science, or whatever, one person can change the entire world around them in whatever they're doing. The only question is, are you that person?